You think you can afford this? Lucas crossed his arms, a mocking gleam in his eyes as he looked at the black man standing before him. A worn-out coat, scuffed shoes, everything about him screamed that he wasn't a potential customer. The man remained calm, his fingers lightly grazing the shimmering silver watch displayed under the glass. I'd like to see this model. Lucas let out a laugh, dripping with disdain. This one? He repeated, then pushed the watch slightly out of the man's reach. Do you even know how much this costs? Just one look at you and I already know, don't waste my time. A few nearby customers overheard and chuckled softly. One woman even cast the man a disdainful glance, as if his mere presence tainted the store's luxury. The man stood silent for a few seconds. He didn't get angry, didn't argue. But in his eyes, a chilling stillness flickered. Then, he set the watch down and looked Lucas straight in the eye. Call your manager. Lucas raised an eyebrow, as if he had just heard the most ridiculous thing all day. Manager? He scoffed, shaking his head. You think asking for a manager is going to change anything? Listen. I'll make this clear, we don't sell to people like you. And before the man could say another word, Lucas signaled to security. Get him out. Two burly security guards stepped forward, their faces void of expression. They didn't ask questions, didn't care about right or wrong, they only saw someone who didn't belong. But just then, Lucas's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A call from headquarters. Annoyed, he furrowed his brows but answered anyway. Lucas speaking. What's? He didn't even finish his sentence before a sharp, urgent voice cut in from the other end. And at that moment, Lucas's breath hitched. Slowly. For the first time, he truly looked at the man standing before him. A creeping unease slithered into his bones. No. No way. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. And in the span of a single heartbeat, he realized, he had just made an irreversible mistake. Who exactly did Lucas just offend? What is the true identity of this mysterious man? And when the truth comes to light, can you guess what Lucas's fate will be? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and follow the channel for more thrilling stories. The Magnifique luxury fashion boutique was located in the heart of the city's most expensive district, where designer suits were more than just clothing, they were symbols of power. This was where the elite came to drape themselves in the finest, tailor-made designs, with price tags that could rival a luxury car. That afternoon, the store was relatively quiet. A middle-aged black man walked in, his sharp eyes sweeping across the opulent space, where crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. He wore a long black wool coat, with a simple yet elegant outfit underneath. The watch on his wrist had a minimalist design, no dazzling diamonds, no flashy luxury logos. That alone made him stand out from the typical clientele here, those who wore expensive outfits like declarations of their status. From the moment he stepped through the doors, Mark, a young sales associate, took notice. Standing behind the reception desk, Mark's eyes instinctively scanned the man from head to toe. No obvious signs of wealth, no entourage, no aura of someone who belonged to the elite clientele this store catered to. Mark frowned slightly but maintained a professional tone. Good afternoon, sir. How may I assist you? The man nodded slightly and walked toward the main display area. I'd like to see your latest suit collection. Mark raised an eyebrow, giving him another once-over. This collection is quite expensive, sir, he emphasized. I'm afraid we only serve customers with appointments. It wasn't just a statement. It carried an unmistakable tone of doubt. The man remained calm. I don't have an appointment. But I'd like to see the collection. Mark smirked slightly. A glint of amusement in his eyes. I see. But are you sure? These suits aren't exactly cheap. His words were laced with an unspoken implication that this man was wasting his time. Some of the other customers in the store had started to glance their way. Sensing the quiet tension in the air, the man tilted his head slightly. His sharp gaze analyzing every subtle shift in Mark's expression. I think it would be best if you called your manager. Mark let out a small chuckle, shaking his head as if pitying him. My manager? I'm afraid he'll tell you the same thing. But the man didn't waver. His voice was firm as he repeated. Call him. Mark hesitated for a brief moment before pressing the communication device on his collar. Lucas? There's a customer here asking to see you. Moments later. Lucas? The store manager emerged from the back office. He was a white man in his mid-30s, dressed in a flawlessly tailored suit. His slicked back hair giving him a polished and commanding presence. Lucas strode toward the reception area, his sharp gaze sweeping over the unfamiliar customer. He noticed it immediately, this man was different. Not the kind of client this boutique typically welcomed. Is there a problem? Mark gave a small shrug and tilted his chin toward the man. He wants to see the new suit collection but doesn't have an appointment. I explained our policy. But he insisted on speaking to you. Lucas crossed his arms, his eyes scanning the man from head to toe. A polite but condescending smile appeared on his lips. I'm sorry, sir? But our store only serves customers by appointment, he said smoothly. His tone firm yet final. Besides, these suits are custom-made for our exclusive clientele. I'm afraid they wouldn't be a good fit for you. The man studied Lucas for a long moment. There was something unreadable in his gaze, not anger, not frustration, but a quiet, piercing observation. Not a good fit for me, he repeated, a faint smirk forming at the corner of his lips. Lucas gave a small shrug, still wearing that arrogant smile. That's right. I think you'd be better off finding a store more suited to your needs. Mark, standing nearby, struggled to suppress a chuckle. A few other customers in the store had now turned their attention to the exchange. Intrigued by the subtle but growing tension, an odd stillness settled over the boutique. The man took a slow breath, his eyes turning cold. I see. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the store. Lucas and Mark exchanged glances before bursting into mocking laughter. Another delusional one. Lucas scoffed, shaking his head. Did he really think he could just walk in here and be treated like a real customer? Ridiculous. Mark snickered. Do you think he could even afford a single button in this place? Lucas laughed again, already dismissing the entire encounter from his mind. To him, the story was over. What he didn't know was that in just 24 hours, he would be the one begging for forgiveness. The next day, Magnifique was just as busy as usual. Lucas, the store manager, stood observing everything with satisfaction. Just then, the glass doors swung open again. The black man from the day before walked in. This time, he was dressed in an elegant black suit, though his face remained as calm and composed as before. The moment he stepped inside, all eyes in the store turned to him. Mark, the same sales associate from yesterday, immediately frowned the moment he saw him. He quickly stepped forward, blocking the man's path. "I'm sorry. But I think you're in the wrong place. I told you yesterday, this store isn't for people like you." The man's eyebrows raised slightly. His voice was deep and steady, yet carried a subtle hint of danger. "People like me?" Mark shrugged, making no effort to hide his meaning. "I mean, this store serves customers who are deserving." "So you're saying I don't deserve to be here?" Mark smirked. "If you can afford to buy something here, I'll personally wrap it for you. But if not, I'm afraid you're just disturbing our real customers." Soft chuckles rippled through the store. A few customers glanced at the black man with amused, condescending expressions, assuming he was just another wannabe trying to prove something. The man said nothing. He simply looked at Mark in silence. But this time, he wasn't planning to walk away as easily as he had the day before. Slowly, he spoke. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Mark let out a laugh, eyeing him mockingly. "Really? You think the manager will care about this?" The man remained composed. "I have some business to discuss with the person in charge." Mark shook his head but turned and walked toward the back. A few minutes later, Lucas emerged. Lucas crossed his arms, staring at the man with an amused smirk. He recognized him instantly, the guy who had been turned away yesterday. "You again?" Lucas scoffed. "I thought I made myself perfectly clear. This store isn't for people like you." The man didn't respond. He simply held Lucas's gaze. "I have something to discuss," Lucas chuckled. "Oh. And what exactly would that be? Are you here to bargain? Or are you just trying to prove you can actually afford something in this store?" "I'd be careful with your words if I were you," Lucas sneered. "Oh yeah. I'm just speaking the truth. A luxury boutique like this doesn't cater to unfitting customers." "Unfitting?" the man repeated. "That's right." Lucas smirked. "And if you don't leave now, I'll call security." No one in the store knew that in just one day, Lucas would be the one on his knees, begging for forgiveness. But by then, it might already be too late. The man remained still, neither angry nor willing to leave. His calm demeanor unsettled Lucas. He had dealt with plenty of arrogant customers before. But, to him, this man wasn't even worth respecting. "You're still standing here?" Lucas sneered. "I told you to leave." The man tilted his head slightly, his gaze turning ice cold. "I'm giving you a chance." For a brief moment, Lucas hesitated. Something about that tone sent a shiver down his spine. But he quickly shook off the feeling. "A chance?" Lucas let out a mocking laugh. "Who do you think you are?" No one in the store knew that within the next 24 hours, Lucas would regret ever uttering those words. He gestured to a nearby security guard. "Get him out of here." The guard nodded, stepping forward and placing a firm hand on the man's shoulder. "Sir? I need you to leave the store. Now." All eyes in the boutique were locked on the scene unfolding. Some customers watched with amused smiles, while others remained silent, intrigued to see what would happen next. Still, the man did not react. The guard's voice grew sharper. "Did you not hear me? I said leave." Lucas crossed his arms, his expression full of contempt. "Looks like we'll have to do this the hard way." He turned to the guard. "If he won't leave, throw him out." Those words were the final straw. A heavy silence fell over the store. Then, with an effortless motion, The man removed the guard's hand from his shoulder. His eyes turned colder. The patience he had shown was gone. And in that moment, no one realized they had just crossed a line. They had provoked someone they never should have challenged. The man stood still for a moment, his gaze darkening. All the patience he had shown so far, it had only been a test. But now, he had seen enough. "Are you sure you want to do this?" His voice was low, steady. As he turned his eyes toward Lucas, Lucas let out a mocking laugh. "Oh. It's not a matter of want. I will." He had no idea that those words would become a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The security guard said nothing, gripping the man's arm tightly, ready to drag him out. But the moment his fingers tightened, the guard collapsed to his knees, clutching his wrist, his eyes wide with shock. He had no idea what had just happened. All he knew was the sharp, searing pain spreading through his arm, as if an invisible force had just warned him. Lucas went pale. He hadn't expected this. You dare?" The man calmly adjusted his collar, his expression as composed as if he had never laid a hand on anyone. But that very composure made everyone in the store feel an unbearable weight pressing down on them. "Now," the man said quietly, "I want to speak to the manager." Lucas swallowed hard. But instead of fear, anger burned in his chest. He had been humiliated in front of everyone. "Fine. You want to speak to the manager? I'll call him right now." He pulled out his phone and dialed. But the arrogance in his eyes was gone. Because deep down, an uneasy feeling had begun to creep in. A few moments later, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit emerged from the VIP section. Jonathan Moore, the senior manager of Magnifique. Lucas rushed to him immediately, pointing at the man. "Mr. Moore, this guy is causing trouble. He refuses to leave." Jonathan narrowed his eyes at the man. And in that brief second, he made the same assumption as Lucas. Because to him, someone like this had no reason to be inside their prestigious store. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Jonathan's voice was firm, authoritative, unquestioning. The man's lips curled into a faint smirk. "You're not going to ask what happened?" Jonathan crossed his arms, his expression full of condescension. "I don't need to. I trust my employees." A fatal mistake. Lucas exhaled in relief, thinking his manager had his back. He had no idea. He had just dragged both himself and his boss to the edge of a cliff. Because the man standing before them was not someone they should have underestimated. He had given them more chances than they deserved. And now, their time was up. The black man gazed at Jonathan, his expression darkening. Disappointment was evident on his face. "I've been patient enough." His voice was calm. Yet an invisible weight settled over the room. Both Lucas and Jonathan felt an uneasy sensation creeping into their chests, as if they had just made a terrible mistake. Yet neither of them realized who they had just crossed. Jonathan cleared his throat, trying to maintain his professional demeanor. "If you refuse to leave, I'll call the police." Lucas immediately chimed in. "That's right. Let the cops deal with him." Neither of them knew that, in just a few minutes, they would be the ones begging to escape this situation. The man let out a slow sigh. "All right. Since that's your decision." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The people around watched in curiosity. They assumed he was calling a friend or family member for help. But none of them could have guessed, this phone call would change the fate of this store forever. When the call connected, The man spoke just one simple sentence: terminate the contract with this store. Immediately. Silence. Lucas and Jonathan exchanged confused glances. Terminate the contract. Jonathan frowned. What the hell are you talking about? The man calmly slipped his phone back into his pocket. His expression unchanged. I won't waste time explaining. You'll find out soon enough. And at that moment, the nightmare truly began. Within minutes, Jonathan's phone rang. Then again. And again. When he finally answered, his face turned ghostly pale. What? A frantic voice on the other end shouted, Headquarters just issued an emergency order. All lease agreements for this store have been revoked. We have to shut down within 24 hours. Jonathan felt his entire world collapse. No. No. This can't be happening. Lucas froze. He didn't understand what was going on. But the look on Jonathan's face sent a wave of fear crashing over him. Who the hell is he? Jonathan didn't answer. He couldn't. Cold sweat dripped down his back. Because now he understood. He had made an irreversible mistake. Slowly, he lifted his head, his voice trembling. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly, his eyes icy. Now you're asking that question. A shiver ran down Jonathan's spine. Lucas, too, was beginning to realize something was terribly wrong. His voice cracked. You can't be. There's no way you're. The man's next words froze them both in place. I'm the primary investor in this retail chain. The air was sucked from the room. Jonathan staggered, barely able to stand. Lucas felt his heart stop beating for a second. They had just insulted a man with the power to erase them with a single phone call. Jonathan sat motionless in his office, his trembling hands resting on the polished wooden desk. Everything had happened too fast. Too suddenly. In less than a day. He had gone from being a well-respected manager of a prestigious store to a man with no way out. Across from him, Lucas, the employee he had once trusted, was just as pale. Sweat dripping down his forehead. This has to be a mistake. We didn't do anything wrong, Lucas stammered, his voice cracking with panic. Jonathan tried to collect himself. He couldn't believe that because of some random black customer, they had ended up in this situation. The office door swung open. A group of men in suits entered, led by a salt-and-pepper-haired man, Mr. Williams, the regional director of the store chain. His face was expressionless, his gaze sharp as if he already knew everything. Jonathan. Lucas. His voice rang out like a death knell in the silent office. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jonathan tried to speak, but no words came out. Williams threw a stack of documents onto the desk. 10 minutes ago, I received the order to terminate both of you. Jonathan and Lucas's eyes widened in shock. What? Williams didn't give them a chance to react and continued. This store will be shut down within 24 hours. The chain is cutting all ties with both of you and reporting your actions to the Trade Council. Panic surged through Lucas as he shouted. No. This has to be some kind of joke. You're ruining my career over some random customer. But the moment those words left his mouth, the air in the room grew unbearably heavy. Because the black man, who had remained silent this whole time, suddenly stepped forward. His gaze was sharp, radiating an authority that sent shivers down Lucas's spine. The man looked directly at Lucas, his voice cold and calm. A random customer. He repeated, his words carrying an unshakable weight. Lucas felt like he had just provoked a beast. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Jonathan froze in place. The man smirked faintly. "Do you have any idea," he said slowly, "how many people would beg on their knees for the chance to work with me?" Lucas swallowed hard. The black man took another step forward, his presence suffocating. "But you think you have the right to look down on me? You think that because of my skin color, I don't belong here?" Lucas trembled. He wanted to speak, to deny it, but the words refused to come. The man's smirk vanished. His eyes turned ice cold. "Today, I'll teach you a lesson about the consequences of ignorance." Williams stepped up and placed 2 black envelopes in front of Lucas and Jonathan. "These are your immediate termination letters." Lucas grabbed his envelope, scanning the contents. And then, he froze. Not only was he fired, he was being sued for racial discrimination and for damaging the company's reputation. Jonathan wasn't any better off. He had lost his managerial position, and was permanently banned from working at this store chain or any affiliated companies. Their careers were officially over. All because of one foolish mistake. Because of their arrogance. And because they had dared to look down on this man. Neither of them could utter a single word. Jonathan tried to plead, but the black man simply looked at him for a moment before turning his back and walking away. Without hesitation. Without a second glance. Because they were no longer worthy of his forgiveness. Jonathan stood frozen in his office, staring at the termination letter in his hands. His entire life had been poured into this job, into the reputation he had spent years building. And now, because of one mistake, because of one foolish decision, everything had crumbled. The store was shut down, permanently. His name was plastered all over the news. A prime example of racial discrimination in the business world. Former partners who once greeted him with warm smiles now avoided him like a contagious disease. His career was over. And just when he thought the nightmare couldn't get any worse, his wife filed for divorce. She took their 2 children and left him alone in an empty, cold house. Jonathan had nothing left. Lucas wasn't any better off. After being fired, he desperately searched for a new job. But no company would take him. His record was tainted. With a stain like that, no one wanted to hire a man who had been sued for racial discrimination. From a sales associate at a luxury store, he had been cast to the bottom of society, wandering aimlessly in search of any job that could keep him afloat. Meanwhile, the black man carried on with his life, never once looking back. He didn't need to do anything more. Those who had looked down on him had already dug their own graves. Jonathan and Lucas's downfall became a cautionary tale. One that people would remember. Because in this world, arrogance and discrimination always come with a price. A price. What do you think about Jonathan and Lucas's outcome? Did they deserve what happened? Or do you think things could have ended differently? Please leave your opinion below in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to see the next stories.